He's just told me he's about 8 mulled wines down. He's not only agreed to go cold swimming tomorrow, it's cold naked swimming tomorrow. Pike bait, we're going to call it. Thank you for coming. Do I need this? Is that better? Somewhere like that? Is that all right? Yeah. Okay. Better, thank you. So this is an experiment. We don't know how this is going to work. We've done 2 or 3 events over the last 4 or 5 years now as reasons to be cheerful, and they've been big events, they've been big day events, and we thought we wanted something a little bit smaller. And particularly this year, Daisy, our eldest daughter who's here, has been on maternity leave, and so absolutely, and the results of that maternity leave, she's asleep at the back there. Not Mabel, that would be wrong, the one near Mabel. And so we couldn't do our big event this year, so we had to do something slightly different with a partner, which went really well, and it's now going to be extended. So we're going to be working with Blue Earth Summit every year now, taking over an evening, 3 evenings of their 3-day event. So that's really great, but that left a gap for a smaller voice with a big message. And so we wanted to try these communes. So I'm really pleased that you trusted us. You've come down our muddy garden. We're about 2 months later than we wanted to be. It's been really stressful, particularly for Nicola. And I can't thank you enough, Nicola and Daisy, for pulling all this together. It's been amazing. I just stand here and dance about being an extrovert in an introvert's body, weirdly. And I have a few things just to talk you through, if that's okay. Firstly, I can't read this. Everyone's sick, unlending Mark. You made it. I don't understand, but what's that say, Nick?
It said you made it. Thank you very much.
What's the sick bit?
Including Mark.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you've had loads of people being ill, right? So we made it here. So thank you.
So thank you for coming. Otherwise, it really would have just.
You should just do
The
this.
door a little bit. Do you think we could just get a little bit cold? Just a little bit gap is fine.
If you need
Thank
a
you.
wee, then there are 2 options. Back
That's
up at the
fine,
house,
thank you.
turn right into the glass doors, and before you go into the kitchen, turn right again, there's a toilet there. Or if you want to pee in the garden, I have absolutely no problem with that in any way, shape or form. Seriously, male, female, not bothered, anything in between, don't care. Go and have a pee outside, crack on, enjoy yourself. But please be careful on uneven ground. The decked areas are particularly slippy. I've been screwing down grippy strips the whole week. So hopefully there shouldn't be any exposed other than on the big bit of decking up by the kitchen, the outdoor kitchen. So please don't go on there because you will slide. And we've got an amazing evening. We've got Dina and Mary. I'm going to introduce them both as we go. And then we've got incredible, we're so lucky to get a beautiful singer to sing beautiful songs in a beautiful place with 2 beautiful people. And we're going to talk about that as we go. So it's going to work like this. We're going to have Dina, then Mary, then a small interval where we've got some samosas and some marshmallows. I don't think they've ever been put together in the same sentence before. Yeah, it's fusion cooking, yeah, that's absolutely right. I think Junie was responsible for the fusion there. And there'll be some more drinks. Tomorrow, if anyone's staying over locally and you want to come for a walk, I'm doing some Qigong at 8 o'clock out there for 15 minutes. And then we're going to go for a walk at, I'm guessing about 8:30, 9 o'clock, Nick, what do you think? Where's breakfast? Do you reckon? Should have thought this through, shouldn't we, really? So I'm going to call it. We're going to go for a walk at 8:30. We'll have a late breakfast when we get back. There will be cold water lake swimming if anyone wants to see Jay naked.
When are you doing Qigong?
8 o'clock.
Oh.
Yeah, 8 o'clock, just out here.
Yeah,
Come enjoy.
yeah.
Come enjoy. Awesome. Is that everyone happy?
Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm really bad at remembering you need a wee. Okay, so if you need a wee, put your hand up and I'll let you go. No, if you need a wee, just slip out. And those of you that don't know what Reasons to be Cheerful is, it's a platform that tries to raise the voices of people whose messages are really important and sometimes don't get heard for whatever reason that is. And sometimes we amplify voices that are already loud, and that's a wonderful job. Publications, videos, events, books, all that kind of stuff, all not for profit. We don't make a penny. If I'm honest with you, we lose money, but that's not the point, is it? The point is we make a huge amount of change, and I think that's really important. And first up, we've got Dina Begum. Hello.
Hi.
I'm going to give you the full verbal, and then we'll talk nicely. Dina is a British-Bangladeshi author and food writer, and the leading voice in Bangladeshi food. She has written articles and recipes for publications such as The Telegraph, Whetstone Magazine, hooray, Delicious, Food 52 and The Metro. Dina is a member of the Guild of Food Writers and featured in a micro-documentary on Great Big Story. The grammar on that's quite clumsy, isn't it? Great Big Story. Yeah, I won't. Is that BBC? I'll have a word.
No, it's NBC. I think.
NBC, but there you go. As well as BBC podcast Mission Curry. Her first book, The Brick Lane Cookbook, 2018, was followed by Made in Bangladesh in 2023. The first mainstream Bangladeshi cookbook featured on best cookbook lists in Vogue, National Geographic, Waitrose and Waterstones. I love the range of that. You got high fashion, and then you got like National Geographic. When I was younger, that's within place you could see naked women. Photographs of naked women. I'm really old. It's the 70s. So I embraced that. That's amazing. Well done, genuinely. Welcome, Dina. Welcome. So
thank you.
We're going to have a conversation for about 20 minutes. Then we're going to open up to questions. If that's all right, I'm going to give you the microphone.
Oh, great.
So Dina, that's an incredible pen portrait I've got there, but I want to kind of go back a little bit and look at how we know what you do.
Yeah.
I'm interested in why you do it, and I always have the same three questions. Some of these will know this. I want to think about what your childhood, I'm going to do it in different order this time, sounded like, smelled of, and tasted of.
Okay. Yeah, I love that question actually. Hi everyone. So taste probably first. I love food. Tasted of mostly my mum's cooking, my grandmother's cooking, my dad as well actually. Who taught me how to make a really nice meat curry. And just kind of, I remember very little about Bangladesh. I came to the UK when I was 4, so I remember the fairs, we went to all the snacks and things in the fair, and candy floss, traditional kind of sweets and savouries. And I think for me, it was just home cooking. I mean, it was quite a division of home cooking as well as cooking food outside the home. Food at school, which is very different to school food at home. And my dad was quite strict about having just traditional food at home, so we wouldn't, unless it was a special occasion, we'd go out to a restaurant or he'd get some food from somewhere else. And he loved fish and chips, so we'd have that sometimes, but he didn't really allow us any junk food, so everything was home cooked, cooked from scratch. I remember just being in my grandmother's kitchen in Birmingham, actually, not too far from here, and she used to grow a lot of produce, traditional produce, as well as British things like rhubarb and all those things. And she used to adapt traditional recipes with British produce, adding British produce to them, like a fish curry with rhubarb, for instance, which was really amazing, really tart and light, more like a broth, rather than a rich curry. And also, I guess my mum just recreating things that she used to love in Bangladesh that we couldn't really get here. The pastries and the sweetmeats and things like that she'd make. Sometimes on the weekends, we'd have like a weekend project. Everyone kind of pitches in and makes something. So those were the flavours. It was very traditional, very Bangladeshi, which is why, I'm very kind of Bangladeshi food is very important to me, and it's, something that I love to cook and talk about, In terms of sounds, it's quite funny. I remember, it's really embarrassing. I loved country music when I was growing up. So I used to have a radio and just listen to country music all the time because there were many stories in each of the songs. So, and everyone was wondering, why are you listening to this? So my brothers and sisters would be listening to Top of the Pops and I'd be listening to country music. Or it'd be Bollywood, on the weekends my dad would get a Bollywood film, in those days in the, VHS things. And so it'd be like a mixture of things. And those would be the sounds, as well as kind of, I guess, traditional Bengali music. We also had at home, my dad used to love poetry and traditional classical Bangladeshi music or Bengali music. And there's a huge kind of tradition of poetry. Arts is huge in Bengali, you may already know. So poetry, literature, song, performances. So that was kind of quite a constant in our home. So I love kind of, when we used to go to family friends' houses or they'd come over, everyone used to gather around each other's houses on the weekends. So you'd take turns, to go to people's houses and family friends, and the aunties would get together in the kitchen, which was a bit sexist back in the day, and cook, and the uncles would be hanging around the living room, and the kids would be asked to put on a performance, a poem or a song, or, sometimes really kind of, which wasn't very nice, but you'd have to, I don't know, spelling tests or something random that my dad would cook up, and the one who didn't get them all would be really sad, and it was just quite actually a bit mean when I think about it. But I loved it. It was just really lively, really colourful. Smells. Yeah, smells, I guess, kind of all the traditional spices and flavours that we had. And also baking, I love baking. So that's something that I learned when I started going to primary school when I came to the UK. And I love baking still to this day. And I love infusing kind of traditional flavours and spices into British bakes, I guess, or Western bakes.
I love that.
Yeah.
If I close my eyes, I can sense with every bit of my senses that childhood. The smells, the noise, your dad's weird spelling thing. I kind of like that, actually. It's the kind of thing I'd do. Was this in Birmingham? Was this in Birmingham?
In London and partly in Birmingham.
Partly
So
in Birmingham. And you talked then about that kind of gender split. All the aunts in the kitchen, all the men somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's how I remember. I grew up near Coventry in the late 60s, 70s. And all my family worked in automotive. And so it was kind of weird. Like all the men would be out in the shed with a lathe, and all the women would be inside exactly as you've just described.
Yeah.
Caring, nurturing, lifting, laughing. I mean, it was just the best, most
really
fun.
joyful. Yeah.
And as the evening or the day went on, they'd come back together. You get a breakaway, and then that would be enough for the next person to break away.
Yeah.
And I know it's wrong. It's probably wrong to think fondly of that split, but there were bits of it that I thought were really lovely as well.
Absolutely.
And particularly, I don't think men particularly talk to each other very well, and maybe you can talk about swarf and your feelings. Maybe that's a thing that you could have done back then. So I've got that really interesting vision in my mind there. And then your dad's love of fish and chips. That's fascinating. Did you find that classic first generation or second generation in your case, immigrant, horrible words, all of these, pressure for education? Did you have this? Did you feel that as you were growing through education?
Yeah, kind of. I think, I love books and I love to read. So English was my favourite subject, history, anything humanities, I loved. Hated maths so much. And, being Asian in our kind of culture, my dad loved maths and I was like the worst at it. That's the only thing that I did not have an interest in. And I think it's common for a lot of things. If you're not interested in something, you don't really want to learn because you're not really interested in it. And for me, I was just kind of not bothered. I didn't really care if I got a good grade in maths. And my dad was, a huge disappointment because but not in a mean way, but he just like, okay, you've got to do these sums, you've got to have you learnt your times tables after school. So he'd give us more homework on top of homework. So that's what I remember. I love studying. I was a bit of a nerd, so I didn't mind it so much. But I remember my sisters, kind of saying, "Oh God, we just had to come home, do your homework," and then Dad would give us 2 more hours of homework on top. And he was really strict about handwriting, so my handwriting was really bad. So he made me for like 3 months just start from the ABCs and just do handwriting lessons every day for an hour after school, literally for months until you could read my writing. Because I couldn't even read my writing, so bad. But I just really, now every time I write something, it always reminds me of my dad.
And it's
left-handed? No, right-handed.
Right.
And it's
Show me your right middle finger. Have you lost your writing callus? You've all lost you've all lost it, haven't you?
Oh my
You've still
God.
got yours.
Oh.
Yeah,
I
mine's
think
gone.
about that.
I don't know where it's gone.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because the other day I was writing because I didn't want to carry my laptop and I'm like, oh my God, this is just so much harder than it used to be, just writing by hand and just writing pages. So yeah, education was a huge thing and it was a pressure, and I think for me, not so much, mostly because I love creative stuff. So I think that was something that my dad was like, okay, you can enjoy creative things, but in your spare time, not as your main thing. So, he wanted me, as typical, like a lot of parents, a doctor or a lawyer or something, or an accountant. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do any of those things. I hate maths, I don't really like science that much. I'm interested in it, but not that much. And all the things I liked were creative things. I love drawing, I love, painting. Can't sing, but I love music. And so it was a challenge in a way to kind of try and do the things that would make my parents happy, but also want to do my creative stuff. I was always writing, I used to love writing poetry, and I still do, and short stories. I mean, I started writing fiction actually before food writing, which I still do, so that's
wonderful.
how I came into food writing.
And your relationship with your grandparents, did they come over? How did that progress as you aged?
My grandparents came to the UK. I think my grandmother came in the 70s, but my late maternal grandfather was here in the 60s, and I think same for my dad's dad. So my dad was here from the 70s. So back then, in the 60s and 70s, a lot of South Asian families, Bangladeshi families in particular, the men would come over to work, send money back home and kind of sustain their families. But it's only until the 70s, it wasn't until the 70s that people started bringing over their wives and children. So even though my dad went back to Bangladesh to get married, but I was 4 when I came over, and my little brother was a baby, and so he'd go back every year or so. So the first few years of his marriage were quite tough because my mum was on her own, not literally on her own because she had my grandparents and everyone around her. But that, I think, was quite a bit of a challenge. And so it's, but seeing my grandparents around because they'd been here longer. And then I think we used to always go and visit in Birmingham in particular. Every holiday, it used to be me because I'm the eldest of 5. So I think for my mum, it's, trying to kind of get one child off her hands, so I just, my granddad usually would come and pick me up, and almost every holiday, Christmas and summer in particular, I'd be going over there. Summer, we'd all go over. And those used to be my fondest memories growing up, not just in London, but also in Birmingham, because that had such an impact on just my life, generally food, how I, connect with family members and just how I see everything. And my relationship to not just cooking, but growing food and being, it being such a way to connect with people. It's such a, what shall I say? It's such a inclusive thing. You don't have to know language or people or anything. You taste some good food. I remember my grandmother's house in Birmingham. She'd welcome everybody. It used to be my aunt's friends used to come over all the time. So we had a huge, diverse range of people coming to the house, and it was really nice to see that because they had a, big house and people would, come round often, which was quite different to me growing up in London. I grew up in a little flat in East London, so we didn't have that outdoor space. So going to Birmingham was such a treat.
It's it's one of my favourites. I mean, we're lucky; we're half an hour from it. And I grew up in Coventry, which is it blurs into Birmingham. It kind of smears at the edges. And it's an incredible city, incredibly diverse and creative and accepting in ways that you take for granted when you're from here, and then you move away and think, can't it be a bit more like that? But I'm interested in this kind of kindling, this little nugget of glow around cooking, and that really took oxygen through your relationship with your grandparents, or was this something that you could also grow? I know you said your dad cooked. Was this something that grew at home? Where was that passion stoked?
I don't know really. All I remember is wanting to cook and create things, whether it's food or drawing or something. I just loved making things. So I used to always get told off trying to kind of turn the cooker on, when I was really young. So my mum would be like, no, you can't. And then I'd kind of rummage through and just make a mess of her kitchen and, pretend to be cooking. And then I think she kind of started letting me cook when I started baking in primary school. So I'd want to, bake things at home, and I loved that because for her it's just simple, just put things in a bowl, and it wasn't as complicated as traditional Bangladeshi food where you have to, or very rarely would you use a knife, for instance. So the child, it's an easy thing for a child to do. So from that, I started kind of helping my mum with the, prepping things when she was making traditional meals. My dad as well. And then because I'm the eldest, I remember I started cooking actually quite early on, making meals when I was probably about 12-ish, making like full meals after school. There was a point when my mum wasn't too well, so I'd come home and I'd, often, and my dad used to be at work, working quite late. He used to be a tailor actually, just off Brick Lane. And so I'd kind of be responsible for making a meal. Usually used to be a lamb curry or something, simple, that you could put everything together in a pot and just, cook it. And so those were actually good memories. I mean, it sounds really strange when you think about it now, like a 12-year-old in the kitchen, making a curry and a full meal. But I really enjoyed it because I kind of grew up helping my mother and my grandmother. So for me, it wasn't so unusual. So I really kind of enjoyed making things at first that my parents would say, okay, would be good if we made this. Obviously, sometimes my mum would be supervising, but but then I started making things on my own, experimenting a little bit, wanting to learn more dishes, more things. And Bangladesh is such a fish-loving nation. There's fish is a huge component of our culture and cuisine. So fish used to be something that I came to later in my kind of culinary journey, I guess, because it takes more prep and it's the cooking process is much more delicate. So you can easily get a fish curry wrong, whereas with meat or chicken, it's not so easy, not so hard to kind of get something right. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just because I was surrounded by people cooking all the time. Every day we'd have like fresh food in the house, made from scratch. Every weekend there'd be kind of a little feast. We'd have people coming over all the time. We'd go over to people's houses. So it was and constant, conversation around food, what we'd be cooking. My dad, especially, used to talk about. He loved, even though he didn't cook much, but he loved basically planning the menu and what would go with which dish. So for instance, cook the fish with this, or the meat with this, or what we're having for dinner tomorrow, or what we're having on the weekend. And he had such a good palate. I mean, when I started my food writing journey about 10 years ago, I mean, I've always been writing recipes, but then 10 years ago, I started getting into food writing, as a profession. And Dad used to be my kind of number one taste tester, basically. So if it passed the test with him, then it was fine. So
critic.
It was really hard. I remember making one dish, which was traditional Bangladeshi sweet, and it's quite popular in Bengal as well, rasgulla, which is a fresh cheese dumpling. You may have seen it, soaked in syrup, right? So it's quite popular in Bengal and Bangladesh. And so I remember I couldn't get it right, and about middle of the night I'd be making this. At 11 or 12 o'clock. And then my dad would see me constantly in the kitchen, what are you doing? And then I made it probably about 7 or 8 times for the book until I got it right finally. And it's such a simple process, but it's so tricky to kind of get right. If you don't make the cheese right, if you don't cook it at the right kind of temperature, if you don't kind of let it rest for a certain period, it can go terribly wrong. So kind of like, I guess, souffle or something, if you make.
This is maths. This is maths. Like, the thing you hated is like what's made you the best cook ever, isn't it?
Baking actually is, quite exact. So yeah.
That's wonderful. And that will come back to food, obviously. But arriving in a culture that is not your own, given the fact you didn't remember much about Bangladesh, and we'll come back to Bangladesh as well soon. How did you find yourself? Where did you find yourself? Was it out with your mates? Was it dancing? Was it walking? Was it swimming? Was it in sport? Or was it literally with a knife in your hand and an onion in the other?
It's a quite interesting question, actually. I hadn't really thought about that, but maybe books. I think I love reading.
Said that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So I used to, I love to talk now, but I didn't used to talk at all when I was in school. My school report always said she doesn't speak, she doesn't say a word, never raises a hand, and we can't get her to speak. But I used to always be buried, within the pages of a book. And I love that you could learn about anything, travel anywhere within the pages of a book, learn about different cultures, different people, different times. And that used to be my thing. Even though I love these family gatherings, sometimes, actually, half of the time I would be hidden away with a book and always get told off. Not, bedtime, I just have one memory I have is trying to hide a giant book underneath my pillow, and my dad was like, why aren't you sleeping? And then I have a little light, and he said it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I think it was David Copperfield, I think, or something. I think it was. And it was a really old volume, and it was quite like chunky. And I was trying to hide under my pillow, and he saw it, and he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm trying to sleep. And then he saw this book peering out from underneath my pillow. And I just couldn't, I was obsessed, I still am. I love reading. I don't read as much as I used to, but I think books helped me kind of, I guess, see the world as I see it now. The people, how I see people, how I kind of, I guess, my openness and creativity, I think, is definitely helped by the fact that I explored all these different kind of scenarios in books and different people. And they were just kind of like, it sounds sad, like friends to me when I was growing up. I remember reading The Great Gatsby like about 9 times or something. And every single time it was like reading it, for the first time. And I loved it. And, Jane Austen's one of my favourite writers. So yeah, books definitely, and writing after that.
What's your favourite Jane Austen?
Mansfield Park.
Mansfield Park.
Yeah.
I guessed Emma.
Really?
Yeah, I would have done. It's interesting. I mean, I've not read like that for years, and I miss it really. But for you, was it an escape? Was it an expansion of your mind, or was it because there was a loneliness that you wanted to sort of like satiate?
I think all three, to be honest, because for me, it sounds really cliche, but I always felt like I wasn't understood. And I wanted, to write. I wanted to do all these creative things, things sometimes that my other family members weren't doing. It wasn't, my dad loved literature, but it was mostly Eastern literature, so not the things I liked, even though I do love that as well. So I felt that I couldn't share the things I loved with people around me. And it was an escape in the sense that, you'd have the kind of day-to-day, and I was in London. My day-to-day life was, in a small flat, going to school, and then weekends would be obviously around family, but it was quite simple. And so for me, it was, really fascinating learning about different kind of people, different countries, different worlds, and also expanding, my kind of knowledge of the world as well. I love that. I just think you can find out anything. You don't have to go anywhere, but you just, open up a book and it transports you somewhere else.
That's beautiful. Well, they're time machines, and they take you forward or they take you back, but I love this idea of them taking you somewhere else other than wherever you were living in East Stratford, I'm guessing.
I grew up in Limehouse and Bethnal Green, so just near Brick Lane.
I love Bethnal Green. There's a great bar there.
Yeah, which one?
Satan's Whiskers.
Oh, really? There's somebody.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's
Yeah.
high pitched. Really,
Pound
I just
pound
met the girl
margarita.
who's the bartender there 2 days ago.
Oh, amazing. Truly.
Yeah.
But we'll leave that for another time. That's a really interesting window, little slit into your world. How did you move out of Bethnal Green? Did you go to university? Did you grow into a bigger version of yourself? And if so, how did you know which version of yourself to grow into?
You're asking really deep questions.
Sorry.
No, good. I like them. I did go to university in London, but I didn't move away to go to university. So again, it was coming home at the end of the day, going to university in London, and still being around my family, which I love. And but also I think compared to my younger siblings who did actually move out and go away to university, they had a different experience of university life and just life, growing up.
You were the oldest?
Yes. So I think, my parents were hesitant to kind of let me move away at that time. And I was probably one of the first girls in the family to go away go to university. And out of my cousins, so for them it was something new and unknown. So my dad was, was happier if I stayed at home as much as I wanted to, go away. So it's, I think finding myself, it was, I don't know, it was actually during university, even though I didn't go away, but it was after university actually when I went to America, and that was, I think, one of the defining moments in my life where I went to New York, made lots of different friends, and it was when I was 20, and I loved that moment because suddenly I was kind of transported from literally a little pocket of East London to, New York, and I'd not really been abroad apart from, actually I hadn't even been back to Bangladesh, so for me, that was, a huge eye-opener, and I loved it, just kind of the different people, different ideas, chatting to people, friends that I'm still friends with now, and, just seeing a different place, also a place where I read about, finding out more about the city, and so that was a really good moment, important moment in my life, because it kind of connected me with people I felt more, I guess, I found so many kindred spirits, and I thought, there's people like me who think like me and who I can connect with and who kind of know what I'm talking about, rather than, like I said, I didn't used to talk much, when I was growing up. So for me, it kind of helped me find my voice in a way. And so when I went there, it was just, a huge moment for me. And since then, I think it's been a huge eye-opener. I've gone back to New York 4 times in the last time with my book. So it's a special place for me, and I think just the energy of it I love.
Yeah, I share that completely. And when did you start writing? When did you start taking writing seriously enough to think that you could be published fiction or cooking or wherever you went first?
Probably when I was 14, and I had this, wasn't poetry, it was a piece of writing published on teletext. I don't know if you remember from Channel 4, right? So, and I remember just sending it off, and I can't remember, they did this weekly competition for prose, and I wrote something, can't remember what it was now, but they were sending me a printout and a book token, and I remember I was just so happy. I'm like, oh, somebody actually likes my writing, and because I used to always be writing, and so around that time, and then the following year I went to work for 2 weeks, part of work experience when I was 15 at Fleet Street. It was an insurance magazine, nothing exciting, but it was fun. It just opened up my eyes to journalism, writing, and they actually published a couple of my pieces, which was really amazing because I was 15 and I thought, people actually, take what I write seriously. And then I worked in Uni magazine for a little bit, and it was, I always knew that I wanted to publish, books, I guess, or write in some way or form. So that for me, those were kind of really key moments from 14.
What did Dad think of that aspiration?
Dad, it was like, oh my God, like I sometimes things would like appear in the post, for instance, when I send things off, and I'm like, what is this? And often it used to be this poetry magazine I used to always send stuff to, and had a few things published. And then he wouldn't say anything. He knew how much I loved writing and poetry, even though he didn't really approve. But I think deep down he did. He didn't say anything, but he would kind of show his disapproval. But then recently, actually, he sadly passed away almost 2 years ago, but so he didn't even get to see my new book. But I remember he had an allotment, as you may know. I went to visit his allotment friends during lockdown. And then his friends were chatting to me saying, oh, your dad always speaks highly of you. He says, what a great writer you are. And his daughter's a published writer. And I'm like, you never said any of this to me, He never said anything. And it was just, and his friends everybody else would tell me things that my dad would say about me, but he would never say them to me, So I used to, I just wish I'd actually spoken to him, like he'd actually had the chance to say to me, I'm proud of you, or, I'm happy you're doing this.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I know.
It oozes out of everybody else that knew him, right? And,
yeah.
And is your mum still alive?
Yes.
So you can have the conversation with her about this, and there's something there about maybe. I don't think it's cultural. I think it's just men. Like we're really shit at saying things sometimes until it's too late, and then it all comes out in a garble. And I feel some grief there for you. But I'm certain that but brimming with pride. But just not going to tell you because you didn't choose the way, and the way was maths.
Yes.
Right. Because it's the only way. But tell me about, you combine these two loves, writing and food, and how food makes people feel is really special. Actually, at what point did you think, I'm all in here? This is where I'm going with my career.
It's funny because I still write fiction, and I think for me, I've never had. I've always wanted to do many things, a few different things. So food is one of the things that I really love, and I wanted to also document a lot of these. For me, it was important not just to have these recipes out, but also document part of my history, my heritage, the stories of my grandparents, great grandparents, all the recipes that they taught me, and just the history behind them, and also share with people about Bangladesh, so not very much is known about it. And so it's kind of, I guess, I always think of things in terms of, even when I was younger, I thought, okay, I want to do this, I like this, I like that. If something kind of makes me feel like I want to do this and it gives me a sense of purpose, and whatever it may be, even now I could do something completely different tomorrow, I always think, okay, this is something that I love doing now, this is something I want to do next. But I'm always open to other things that I want to do. I always have a few things that I think, mostly creative things that appeal to me. I'm still writing fiction. I've had some short stories published over the years, and so I feel like I will go back to fiction. But also, I want to I feel like there doesn't need to be like a separation so much of, like if you choose a career path, for instance, you can do a few different things together that kind of complement one another, and also like different phases of different phases of your life kind of determine what you want to do. I think when I was younger, I really wanted to. I always thought I'd have a novel published first before a cookbook, but I always knew I wanted to write a cookbook as well. And I always wanted to do a children's book. There's so many things I want to do. Sometimes I have to kind of stop myself. I'm like, okay, what's next? But just kind of focus on one thing or a couple of things. So I will kind of, I guess, go back to fiction, but then I may also do something different. I love poetry as well so much, and so it's kind of something that I feel like it's where I should be now, but it may be somewhere totally different that I'm tomorrow, you know, or a couple of years down the line.
I love that. Focus on one thing, or a couple of things. And you're right. You know, like time pulls us in. Like it's got its own centre of gravity. All time's arrows are pointed at this message now with you, and fiction can come later. And if you, I've got a really dear friend, Libby Delana, who sees her life in 10-year careers. Every 10 years she changes career.
Yeah.
When she hit 70, she was planning international DJ.
Oh wow!
But life had other plans. She's now a model.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah, and
Wow.
she's doing so well.
Yeah.
So just let life come and go. And it's a classic trait of someone that loves humanities. We love humanities because we can't decide what other subjects. It does them all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like geography is like the perfect subject, in my humble opinion. And so I really like that about you. But just to bring this to an end, like Bangladesh's story is beautiful, and its importance in the world is so undervalued and misunderstood, and yet its fragility due to climate change and rising sea level. I mean, it's something like 36% of the land will be removed if the Greenland ice sheets melt. It's a 7 metre sea level rise all in one go. We're clinging on here, and it's kind of like the canary in the coal mine or the litmus paper. How often do you go back? How often do you go to Bangladesh? And how can more people hear this important, historically, culturally rich story of this amazing country that we kind of just call Asia? We get irritated if you get E17 and E16 mixed up.
Yes,
But we're happy to, the English people, we're happy to mix up entire continents.
Yeah.
You know?
I've only, been back to Bangladesh twice. So once when I was a teenager, that was actually another moment where I thought I need to put recipes in a book, because I saw the traditional cooking in the villages where my family is from, and people kind of live off the land. You have the fish, the livestock, everything. The porridge, greens, veggies, everything's homegrown. Or so I love that concept of kind of farm to table, I guess. And in the way I cook is I try to cook everything from scratch, sometimes really obsessively, and my friends would be like, okay, you can just cut a little bit of a corner, sometimes. So I try and do that now a little bit. But I think it's important to kind of retain, because Bangladeshi cuisine isn't very well known. So I feel like when you come new to a cuisine that's new to you, then it's important to kind of learn about the foundation of it, the history behind it, the traditional recipes, all those recipes. And then later on, I mean, I'm a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to Bangladeshi food or South Asian cuisine. But if you don't know the foundation of something, the history of something, then that will be forever gone. And I think it's not been documented in English before. I know of not very much anyway. There's loads in Bengali. So I think, sorry, I've forgotten what I was saying. See, I told you.
How do we amplify
questions.
the knowledge and message about how amazing this country is and the risk that it's at?
Yeah. So obviously, that's growing up. I saw, floods on TV. Everything that anyone knew about Bangladesh was climate change, floods, flooding. Anytime we talked to family abroad, it was usually something really sad had happened. There was floods and lots of natural disasters. Even non-natural disasters. You have a collapse of the garment industries. There's a lot of Rana Plaza. You have all those things. Not very well regulated in many places, sadly, and that's. I think it's a very crucial part of, it needs to be heard. Like, the people need to know more about Bangladesh. I mean, the curry industry was started by Bangladeshis, actually. People from Bangladesh now. Obviously, it's a new country from 1971, but people from that region started curry houses 80 to 90%, abroad. So many people don't know that, it's Indian curry houses, but they're actually run and owned by Bangladeshis. So it's kind of funny that it's Indian cuisine now has become really popular, not curry house cuisine. I think that's a cuisine in its own right. A lot of people love it. But traditional Indian cooking has also become quite popular now, but I think it's really sad that it's kind of almost bypassed the Bangladeshis and the Bangladeshi cooking that it started with, or the people who started it. So I'm, doing my best to try and change that. There's, loads of friends I know, writers, lots of people on social media. Social media is a huge platform, and I think that's helped change the perception and just kind of growing the interest in Bangladeshi cuisine and other cuisines as well. I think people are really interested nowadays in regional cuisine and kind of very specialist kind of cuisines. And I think, Bangladeshi, I would really welcome, invite people to kind of read about it, try the recipes, try and visit Bangladesh if you can. It's a beautiful country, I went back during my second book research 3 years ago almost, and I loved it, and it's such a vibrant place, it's a friendly place, and it's, people are so welcoming. And I almost felt like a tourist going back because I hadn't been in 25 years, which was, such a long time. But I felt so welcomed, and I loved, the vibrancy of the country, which is what I wanted to kind of portray in my book, especially Made in Bangladesh, the second one. So I hope, it's kind of opening up an avenue for people to kind of try the food and hopefully learn more about the country, because food is such a great entryway into learning about a cuisine and a different kind of culture.
I think I agree, and it's an amazing medium to communicate cultural difference, heritage, history, but also nature collapse, no plants, no insects,
Absolutely.
no plants, no earth. And you're right, you talk about Bangladesh and most people will go Rana Plaza, they'll talk about the collapse of that factory that made Prada as well as Primark. There is no debate about that. And I was really lucky. I used to work in Keighley, a place just sort of north west of Bradford. And one of the women that worked in the team there was Bangladeshi, and she would bring in food. And I know Indian food really well, but I didn't know Bangladeshi food, and it's way better. It's not a league, but it's very different.
Varied, and it's very different. And it's a cuisine, I think, whether you're vegetarian, vegan, something in it for everyone, And I think it's something I love, I loved growing up, and there's so much more that I'm still learning. And I think anyone who's tried it, actually, people always write to me saying, I didn't know. On the surface, it looks very similar to Indian food or, Pakistani food, something that you might be more familiar with. But when you cook with same ingredients or similar ingredients, it's the way you cook that can completely change the dish and the flavours.
And do you know what? I really hope, we'll open for questions in a minute, but I really hope that you've still got that lamb and rhubarb recipe.
Fish and rhubarb.
Recipe somewhere, because
I do. I actually sent it to one of my friends, and I didn't have it in the book because I thought I wanted to keep it traditional. Maybe in the future book.
Put it in there.
Yeah.
Put it in there. Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
We've got time for some questions. Do you have any questions? Or we've got time to not have questions. It's up to you. Who would? Anything popping up? Yeah, one here and then one there.
You mentioned having to try a recipe a number of times before you got it to the point where it could go into the book. Does that happen often, or does a lot of it just flow from your experience? Do you have to try things before you're confident enough to write them down?
Actually, that's a good question, because I almost had to unlearn the way I grew up cooking, because we didn't use measurements, no weighing anything, and no timing anything. So it's a very instinctive way of cooking. And so when I started writing recipes, I had to stop, and it was almost kind of starting a recipe from scratch, time, weigh, measure everything. And so it was important that, because it was a new cuisine, I wanted to allow it to be something that's accessible for everyone to kind of, if they weren't familiar with Bangladeshi food. So I wanted it to be really, so far I haven't had any complaints about something doesn't work. So I feel like I've tried each recipe 2 to 3 times with measurements. So anyone new to the cuisine or not familiar with it will feel confident enough to try it, because everything's kind of broken down as comprehensively as possible.
Makes sense. And there was a question.
I was going to ask, did your dad ever have a go at cooking, or was he completely never tried?
He loved cooking, actually. My dad would have crazy recipes. He had his lamb curries that he cooked when we grew up, and keema ones as well. But when he started his allotment about 20 years ago, he would make random things. Like he would try, mixing Western things with traditional recipe. My mum used to hate it, so he'd make like a traditional prawn bun, and then he'd put beetroot in it or something, and he'd have a pink prawn dish. So, and then he'd like stuff, like a traditional like mince in gourds that he grew, and have all these crazy experiments, which we loved, but we always wonder what's he coming up with. He loved a good stir fry, so that was his thing. So he'd mix everything together, and so with Dad it was an experiment. When he felt like making something different, or just kind of he had some time, he would do that. But we did like his cooking, but sometimes it was a bit unusual.
I love it, the Heston Blumenthal of Bangladesh. That's brilliant. Any more questions before we go to a break? Yeah, one here, please.
So this is a desert island question, maybe two. So if you could only take, say, one dish, or maybe even one favourite ingredient, and one book with you to desert island. Maybe do have access to anything else?
I would, book-wise, I would probably take The Idiot by Dostoevsky, which I love. Brilliant. I love that book, and I think there's always something that you can think about every time you read it. It's a new experience. Ingredient-wise, or a dish, I think maybe a biryani. Bangladeshi biryani, not an Indian biryani. So a kachi biryani, yeah, that's one of my favourite things.
That's brilliant. I grant you both of those. You can take those. And of course you get a copy of the great greatest works of Shakespeare and religious tome of your choice. Okay, we'll call that a break there. We're going to have 5 minutes because I think everyone is about to unlayer another jumper. It's a bit hot in here. Sorry about that. So a 5 minute break. I'm really feeling for you. You've come in your sheepskin and not realising you're actually in a sauna.
6 layers.
I'm so sorry.
That's
so
great.
5 minute break.
Then
we'll come back in with Mary Daniel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone. Was it good? Yeah. I'm just like waffling on.
No, you're brilliant.
Oh, that's fine.